Hi everybody. Now that we've shown how the back Behringer has been connected to the rest of the system, what I wanted to do is kind of take you through all the settings that we've done on that mixer, and that way you'll be more familiar with it. So let's go take a look at the back Behringer and see what we've got. So in this demonstration, I can't show laptops side by side, and so I will try and call out which mixer we're looking at, but the easy way for you to know what mixer that we're at is on the right-hand side, the left-hand side there. You'll see that big booth input right here. And so that's the way that you can know whether you're on the front or the back. And I'll also try and make that clear. So what I wanted to do was just go through the inputs that we've got. And here we are with the booth, and that is a microphone that we've connected to the mixer so that if you need to, you can turn on a microphone and actually give directions to people that are walking through a sound check. That can be important because as more and more people arrive before the service, they get into conversations. Some people are really not focused on going through a sound check very well, and they may need verbal direction. This way, you can turn on a microphone for yourself, use the PA system, and you can direct people through the sound check. That's important because we do need to keep people moving through. The second inputs that you'll notice here are the organ left and the organ right, and those are the inputs to the right and left of the organ. Now those aren't the house mics. Those are the little mic jacks that are down by the organ. We use those primarily for the children's bell choir, although at times there may be soloists that are singing back there as well. Then we have the lapel mics. These are hooked into the back because that's where the receivers are for those lapel mics. And so we have the lapels 1 through 4 connected in here. Next we have the handheld microphone. We don't use that too much, but we do have a handheld if somebody needs to do it. We use that for congregational meetings or when we have to hand a microphone around. The next we have is the computer. And I've colored that specially, and the computer comes in through this. And the computer is unique in that it has no mute group. It is permanently muted, and you have to operate the computer by hand on this mute right here if you want to mute it on or off. That's usually not a problem, but I did want to call that out. And then lastly, we have the house mics, and those are the jacks that are on the left and the right of the stage. Right now we're not using those because we have the sanctuary microphones wired into the stage Behringer so we can control them, but those are what those jacks are. Two very important inputs here are sanctuary and vmix. This sanctuary line right here is the input from the stage Behringer that is going to the sanctuary. Likewise, this is the input from the stage Behringer that's going to the vmix. We've used the same color conventions as the stage Behringer. So when we come in here and we click this output bus, you'll notice everything turns red. And so what this is saying is this is all the sound that we're outputting back to the sanctuary. And you'll notice that the sanctuary bus has been turned up, and likewise vmix has been turned off. So you can notice, for example, that over here on organ left and organ right, we have no sound because the organ does not need to be amplified into the sanctuary. But then when we come to lapel 1, typically used by the pastor, or L3, used by the children's message, those are turned on for the sanctuary because naturally they need amplification. Same for the computer. The computer doesn't put out any sound. It has to run through the house sound system, and it also has to run out of vMix. So if we keep our eyes on those and we come over here to the vMix bus, we'll notice that everything changed. I'm going to go do that again. You'll notice that the organ, these are down for the sanctuary, and then they're up for vMix. And that's for the obvious reason is that we need the amplification to go out to the live stream. Don't need it in-house, but we need it on the live stream. One of the things that I've tried to do in all this is maintain a compatibility in the mute groups. And so when we look at the mute groups, these control sets of microphones, because we're never really turning on a microphone one at a time. What we're really doing is turning on groups of microphones, like we're turning on both the house microphones, or we're turning on both the organ left and the organ right. And so the mute group conventions that I have been using are showing there on the screen. I've used mute group 1 for congregational singing, mute group 3 for the sermon, and mute group 4 for the children's sermon. Now I skipped over mute group 2 because I use that for special music. That can be a praise band, that could be a piano and a soloist, that could be the children's bell choir. This is where all the special music is getting wired. Now we try and keep these mute groups consistent and use them the same way each week. But mute group 2 tends to be special. That's the one that's changing all the time. When you're running sound, you will get a sheet. We call it the vMix sheet. And what it does is it lists the entire order of worship and what scene the vMix operator is going to show. The mute groups that should be used are also listed on that sheet. So the question becomes, how do we run this system now, given that we have two mixers that have to operate in tandem? Well, let's take a look. Here we have the stage Behringer, and I'm going to go over and I'm going to use those mute groups and show you how that operates. So the best thing to do is to kind of keep your eyes here down at the bottom of the screen, and you'll watch these things turn on and off. So we're coming to a part of the service where we're going to do some congregational singing. So I'm going to go over to that Behringer, and I'm going to turn on mute group 1, which is used for congregational singing. I'm going to just do that again so you can see it. And you'll see what's happened. We've turned on the lectern, that's for the soloist, and we've turned on congregational right and congregational left, and that will pick up the organ. And so we've got the stage Behringer all set. But what do we do in the back? Well, let's go take a look. So now I'm going to go to the back Behringer, and there it is. And then let's go over and let's run that. And we know that we're at the back because there's our white booth right there. Well, it's going to operate pretty much in the same fashion. I'm going to set mute group 1. I'm just going to click that again so you can see it. And you'll see what's happened. We've essentially turned off all the microphones. Well, it makes sense because we don't want people on the lapel mics singing solos, and we don't need the computer, and we don't really need these organ left, organ right generally. And so that's how we set that. The mute group tends to be compatible. Now we're just looking because here we are on the vMix, and you'll notice that we're getting possibly some organ left and organ right. But then in the sanctuary, you'll notice a lot of things have been turned down. Okay, so let's go back now, and let's say that we're coming up to the sermon. So let's go see what we're going to do now on the stage Behringer. Here's the stage Behringer, and we're singing, and now we're coming up on the sermon. So I'm going to go over to the stage Behringer here. We can tell because we've got the piano right there. And I'm going to turn on mute group 3. And you can see what happened. I'm just going to click it on and off again real quick so you can see. And you'll notice that all the microphones actually got muted. And that's because during the sermon, we don't want anything getting picked up in the house mics because we'll get kind of an echo, and we certainly don't need it coming in through the soloist or through the piano or anything else like that. So we turn all the microphones off in front. What do we do in the back? So let's go over and let's take a look at the back now. Here's the back Behringer. And I'm going to go over to it now. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to turn on mute group 3. And there it is. I'm just going to do that again real quick. See, there you have mute group 3. And that turned on the lapel mic for the pastor. And that's because when we have a sermon, that's the only mic that we want open. So we've tried to preserve a compatibility between mute groups front and back. 1 means congregational singing. 3 means the sermon. Let's take a look at the children's sermon. There we go. And you can see that turned off the pastor and that turned on the children's sermon. And so the front one actually would stay at 3, everything muted, and then here we have the children's sermon that's on. Now these values are all written down on the vMix sheet, and you can see them. And when you're going through sound checks, that's a good time for you to just be testing the mute groups and see what you've got. Let's take a look at the special music. What would we do for the special music? So let's go to the front. So here we are at the stage Behringer. And I'm going to go over here to the front. And I'm going to hit mute group 2. And there we are. Now, I'm just going to click that again so you can see it. But you can see what we had was 1 week, a soloist, and the piano. And so those are the 2 things that turn on. And you can see it's all green, and that means that's going out on the vMix line. If we take a look at the sanctuary, you'll notice that came down. We left the soloist up a little bit, and that's because the sanctuary doesn't need to amplify the piano. The piano can be heard just fine. Let's go over then to the back Behringer, and let's see what we would have done there. So we come over to the back Behringer, and I'm going to navigate to it, and here we are. And so I'm going to put on mute group 2, and as you'd expect, I'm just going to do that again so you can see it. And as you'd expect, that's basically turned everything off. So the only thing that was on during that special music was the soloist and the piano. One of the things that's really important is what is the outgoing sound level? And we have to be careful of that because the sound will distort if the signal becomes too strong. It clips. You can see that on the little PreSonus box that is taking in the signal because it has little red lights that start flashing saying that it's clipping. And if you listened to the clipped sound, it does sound distorted. So something that's important is for you to keep your eye on the total output volume of the vMix line coming out of the back Behringer, because that's actually what's going to the computer. So the way that we do that is we hit this vMix bus line right here. That is the output that's going to vMix. And if we come over here to channel, what we will see, let me come here. There's what I want, the vMix bus line right there. Okay. And if we come over here to channel, what you will see is a view meter. And we see it on this side right here, and we see the same thing on this side right here. And there are numbers, these are negative, so you start at 0 at the top and you wind up at -50, -60, and this one is pretty much the same, it's just compressed. What we have determined through experimentation is that we need to keep the sound between -40 and -30. So you want to kind of keep the green bar. I wish I could show it, but you can just imagine there's this green bar bouncing up and down, and that's the signal coming in. And we want to make sure that it's staying right here between 30 and 40. If it falls below -40, if it gets into this zone right here, you're starting to get kind of quiet. They might have trouble hearing that out on the internet. If you go over 30 and you start hitting -25, you definitely will start to have a distorted signal. So you really want to stay away from that. If it's touching 30, that's good, but you don't want it to go over 30 very much, or you're going to have a clipped signal. That if you start going over 30, you have to go to the input microphone and turn it down. So that most likely would mean going back to the front Behringer and turning down the microphones that are coming in too loud. For instance, it might be the lectern and you have to turn the lectern down. You don't really want to mess with this output volume here because that messes with everything. And a lot of this stuff is probably set up just fine and working, and there's only one mic that you've got to adjust. Better to go to adjust that one mic than throw the whole system out of whack. That's pretty much how they run. We've tried to maintain a compatibility on the mute groups, and watching the output level of the vMix bus is going to be one of the key jobs that you'll have as a sound person. As always, we appreciate your willingness to come on the sound team, and I hope this has been helpful. Take care.